What if the most mysterious humans who ever lived never truly disappeared? High in the frozen mountains of Siberia, a cave hid their secret for tens of thousands of years until a single finger bone shattered everything we thought we knew. The Denisovans were not Neanderthals, not Homo sapiens, but something in between. A shadow lineage that shouldn't exist, yet somehow lingers in our DNA. They vanished from the earth, leaving no civilization, no ruins, no record, only whispers in our blood. But what really happened to them, and why do their ghosts still walk with us today? Long before history carved its first marks into stone, the earth belonged to wanderers who drifted across frozen tundras, deep forests and mountains that tore the sky, and in those vast landscapes humans were never alone, for they walked beside others, beings whose faces remain hidden, whose voices dissolved into silence, and whose very existence was erased until the ground itself reluctantly revealed them. The Denisovans were one such people, a lineage so enigmatic that for most of human history they were invisible, leaving behind no monuments, no cave art, no sprawling cities, only fragments as fragile as whispers, a child's finger bone unearthed in the frozen depths of Siberia's Denisova Cave, molars too large for modern jaws, and a weathered jawbone discovered on the windswept Tibetan Plateau. That cave, damp and cold, its walls still scarred by ancient soot, was once a crossroads where Neanderthals, early Homo sapiens, and an unknown branch of humanity crossed paths, their lives intertwining like flickers of firelight in the endless corridors of time. When scientists sequenced DNA from that small finger bone, they expected to uncover familiar stories of Neanderthals or early humans. But what emerged was a stranger, neither us nor them, but something else entirely. A ghost lineage that should not have existed yet announced itself from the depths of the genome, whispering across millennia, "We were here, and you still carry us." Denisovans were close kin of Neanderthals, diverging from a common ancestor perhaps 400,000 years ago, but their bones are vanishingly rare. And so their story comes not from skeletons or artifacts, but from the code embedded in our own cells. Astonishingly, their genetic legacy is vast, stretching across Asia and into Oceania, appearing most strongly in Melanesians and Aboriginal Australians, and even in Tibetans who still carry a Denisovan gene that grants survival in thin mountain air where ordinary lungs falter. Their DNA speaks of strength, endurance, resistance to diseases, and adaptations to hostile climate survival tools we inherited without ever knowing the faces of those who gave them. Imagine those first encounters, perhaps on snowy plains where firelight flickered against the darkness, perhaps in shadowed forests where two species watched each other with equal parts caution and curiosity, eventually exchanging not only tools and gestures but bloodlines. Their futures braided together in ways archaeology could never capture but genetics makes undeniable. And yet, what makes the Denisovans so haunting is not only that they lived, but that they disappeared, leaving no clear trace but the ones hidden inside us. Unlike Neanderthals who left caves painted with ochre and tools that spoke of their ingenuity, the Denisovans remain silent, their legacy preserved not in artifacts but in strands of DNA that act as ghostly signatures of lives once lived. Their vanishing is still a mystery. Perhaps climate shifts extinguished them, perhaps waves of Homo sapiens outcompeted them, or perhaps they were not erased at all but absorbed into us. Their bloodlines dissolved until only fragments remained, invisible but powerful. Even stranger, evidence shows they interbred not just with us, but with Neanderthals too, producing hybrids like the teenage girl found in Denisova Cave, whose very existence blurs the boundaries we once thought defined our species. In truth, humanity's story is not a straight line but a braided river, where currents split, merge, and mingle, creating a tangled network rather than a single path. And the Denisovans are one of the most mysterious tributaries feeding into who we have become. What really happened to them may never be answered with certainty, but perhaps disappearance is not the right word at all. For though their bodies vanished from the earth, their legacy endures in the breath of Tibetan climbers, in the blood of Pacific Islanders, in the hidden corners of our genome, reminding us that the past is never truly gone. The Denisovans may not have left cities, songs, or carvings, but they left something far more enduring, themselves. scattered through us, proof that we are not one story but many, that humanity is not a single species but a mosaic of encounters, exchanges, and survival, stitched together across tens of thousands of years by shadows who should have been forgotten yet remain alive within us still. If the first revelation of the Denisovans was shocking, what came after was stranger still, because the deeper scientists probed into ancient DNA, the more they discovered that these mysterious humans did not vanish like smoke but lingered in ways both unexpected and profound, their genetic fingerprints scattered across continents, shaping lives in the present. When researchers studied people living high in the Himalayas, they found an astonishing clue, a gene called EPAS1, inherited from Denisovans, that allows the body to function in low-oxygen environments where most humans gasp for breath, a silent gift passed down from ancestors who once roamed high plateaus, their lungs and blood uniquely adapted to thin air. In Melanesians, Denisovan DNA accounts for nearly 5% of the genome, influencing immunity, skin, and even how bodies process fat. Traits that may have once meant survival against parasites, infections, and the brutal demands of tropical climates. These fragments are not random. They are tools forged in a different evolutionary furnace, carried into the present by the mingling of bloodlines long ago, and every discovery reframes the way we see humanity, not as a pure lineage, but as a mosaic built from encounters, unions, and exchanges that blurred the boundaries between us and them. Yet for every revelation, questions multiply, because if Denisovans lived across such vast territories, from Siberia to Southeast Asia, how is it that their fossil record is almost invisible? Where are their campsites, their tools, their bones? Were they masters of regions we have not yet excavated, or have their remains simply dissolved into the soil, leaving only the echo of their presence in our genomes? The truth is even more unsettling. Some genetic studies suggest that Denisovans were not a single population but several, scattered across Asia in distinct groups, some of which interbred with humans multiple times, others which disappeared without leaving a trace. Ghostly populations that science can detect in DNA but cannot yet name or picture. It is as though we are haunted not by one lost species but by several, each weaving its thread into the human story before vanishing into obscurity. Imagine this for a moment. As Homo sapiens spread across the ancient world, every new valley, every mountain pass, every jungle clearing may have brought them face to face with strangers, some like the Neanderthals, recognizable and robust, others like the Denisovans, unfamiliar and uncanny, still others that science has not yet classified, shadows moving through the night whose bones may still lie buried beneath untouched soil. The cave in Siberia where Denisovans were found hints at this strangeness. In its layers, researchers uncovered not only the bones of Neanderthals and Denisovans, but also a hybrid child, half Neanderthal and half Denisovan, proof that these meetings were not rare accidents but recurring encounters. Bonds formed in firelit shelters, unions that left behind children whose descendants now walk among us. And this realization bends the way we think of extinction. For perhaps the Denisovans did not simply vanish like the mammoth or the saber-tooth, but dissolved into us, absorbed into the expanding flood of Homo sapiens until their name and culture were lost, but their essence endured, hidden in blood and breath. The haunting possibility remains that entire chapters of our history lie unwritten, that there were species whose names we may never know, whose existence left no fossils, but whose DNA still flows through our veins. Scientists already speak of ghost lineages, populations detected in genetic data that have no bones in the fossil record. No caves bearing their tools, only silent traces locked in chromosomes like messages from the dead. If Denisovans could remain unknown until a tiny finger bone spoke their name, how many others might still be waiting to be found? Or worse, may never be found at all, their stories written only in us. In this light, the Denisovans are not just an evolutionary puzzle. They are a mirror showing us how incomplete our history is, how much lies hidden in the soil, in the ice, and in the uncharted depths of our own DNA. They remind us that humanity is not a singular tale of progress, but a braided river of encounters, of alliances and extinctions, of shadows and revelations, A reminder that the line between past and present is thinner than we imagine, and that within each of us lies the memory of a species that should have disappeared yet still whispers through our blood. Proof that even in disappearance there can be survival of the most unexpected kind. The greatest question, the one that hangs like a shadow over the Denisovans, is not whether they existed but what became of them. And in that silence lies one of the most haunting enigmas of prehistory. For unlike the Neanderthals who left skulls, hearths, and art that speak of their lives, the Denisovans remain spectral, a people reconstructed almost entirely from scraps of DNA and a few fragments of bone, as though nature conspired to keep their story hidden. Some scientists suggest that as climates shifted and glaciers advanced, their populations dwindled, isolated in pockets where food grew scarce and winters stretched mercilessly long, while others argue that Homo sapiens, arriving with new technologies, larger groups, and insatiable hunger for territory, pushed them further into the margins until they faded into memory. Yet the truth may be subtler and stranger, for each time a Denisovan and a Homo sapiens sat together by firelight, exchanged gestures or raised children together, the line between them and us blurred. And in that blurring, the Denisovans may have survived not by holding their ground but by dissolving into us, absorbed until their name was lost but their essence endured. Extinction, in this sense, is not a clean ending but a transformation, a merging into a larger current, a survival written in blood rather than in bones. But another possibility lingers, one far more unsettling, that some Denisovan groups endured longer than we believe, clinging to existence in remote valleys or mountain strongholds, their last chapters hidden in the legends of peoples who came after. Across Asia, stories persist of wild, human-like beings haunting forests and peaks, the Yeti of the Himalayas, the Almas of Mongolia, the orang pendek of Sumatra. Could these myths be cultural echoes of encounters with the last Denisovans? Faint memories of beings who were almost human, yet not quite, who lived close enough to us to mingle but strange enough to inspire awe and fear. It is a chilling thought, for it suggests that the final encounters with them may not lie tens of thousands of years in the past, but in times remembered in whispers and folklore. What makes the Denisovans so haunting is that we cannot reconstruct their world with certainty, what tools they favored, what rituals they practiced, what dreams they carried, because they left behind no painted caves or carved idols, no graves adorned with ornaments or flowers. We cannot know if they sang songs beneath the stars or if they told stories around their fires, if they feared the night or revered the sun. Their silence forces us to imagine them as silhouettes, defined not by their own voices but by the fragments we hold. And yet within that silence there is an extraordinary intimacy, because unlike so many lost species whose bones rest in museums, the Denisovans live inside us. Their DNA influences how we breathe, how we adapt, how we survive, and through this we carry them more deeply than we carry most of our remembered ancestors. They may be gone, but they are not gone, erased yet enduring, vanished yet alive, survivors of a different kind embedded in the very code that defines us. And as scientists continue to probe genomes, they uncover traces of other shadows, other lineages that interbred with both us and the Denisovans, ghost populations with no fossils, no names, only faint signals in DNA like whispers from the dead. This possibility reshapes our understanding of the human story, not as a ladder, climbing upward, but as a braided river where currents diverged, rejoined, and flowed together, creating a mosaic of species whose legacies are inseparable. The Denisovans remind us that the idea of a pure human lineage is an illusion, that we are the descendants not of one species but of many, stitched together by time, chance, and encounters in caves and forests long forgotten. What really happened to them may never be explained with certainty, but perhaps disappearance is the wrong word entirely, for they survive in the breath of Tibetan climbers scaling impossible peaks, in the resilience of islanders in Oceania, in the unseen immunity protecting us from ancient diseases, in the very blood of those watching and listening today. Their story is not one of erasure, but of transformation, proof that sometimes the past survives not in monuments or ruins, but in flesh and memory hidden in plain sight. And perhaps that is why they haunt us so deeply, because they blur the boundary between what is lost and what endures, because they remind us that extinction and survival are not opposites but sometimes two faces of the same truth. As we look into the abyss of prehistory, we realize the abyss is looking back through our own DNA, whispering in the language of forgotten bloodlines that the past is never truly gone, that the ghosts of humanity are not behind us but within us, shaping us still.